The call ended a while ago, and you said what you were supposed to say. You stayed focused, you stayed professional, and you got through it. And now you're in your car, or you're making dinner, or you're lying in bed, and the conversation is still there, running in your mind. And you're going back over what you said, what they said, and then focusing on the part where they raised their voice. And you're checking whether you handled the call right. The call is over, but you're not. And you're not entirely sure why the conversation just won't let go of you. A lot of people decide that this means they're too sensitive or that they're just not cut out for this kind of work. So they try to toughen up or they tell themselves that the call shouldn't bother them this much, but it does. And what you're feeling there is not a sign that you're too soft for the job. That feeling is what happens when you're handed responsibility for something and never given a place to set that responsibility down. What you're carrying after a hard call has a lot less to do with how sensitive you are and more to do with how the work is built. And once you can see how the work is built, then the feeling starts to make a lot more sense. I'm Tammy Brewington, founder of People First Workflow, and I built this work after years in roles where difficult calls, complaints, and escalations were part of the job. And over time, I realized something important. The hardest part of the work wasn't the conversation itself. It was managing my own stress while staying clear and professional. So I started building these tools to support that part of the work. In this video, I want to stay with that moment after the call ends, the part where the call follows you home, and look at what's happening underneath that feeling. Because once you can see the feeling clearly, you stop blaming yourself for carrying it home. The call had a beginning and an end, but the responsibility that was handed to you didn't end with the call. While you were on the call, you were also holding the customer's problem, their anger, the outcome, and whether the issue was resolved. And when the line or the call ended, none of that got handed off to anyone else. And if it stayed with you because there was nowhere for the feeling of the issue to go, then it wasn't closed. Now, I want you to think about what closure looks like in most frontline roles. The call drops, the timer resets, and the next call is already coming in. And there's no moment built in the day where you get to mark the last one is finished. So you move straight from one person's pressure into the next person's pressure. And the only thing carrying the leftover weight from the call before is you. This is what I call structural non closure. A call can end without ever closing. The ending is the line going dead, and the closing is the responsibility leaving you. And then getting documented, handed to someone, resolved, or formally set down. But when the first one happens, which is the responsibility leaving you after a call, and the second one doesn't, your attention keeps the call open on its own because some part of you is still responsible for an outcome that was never released. So the reason the call follows you home is not that you care too much. The reason the call follows you home is that the responsibility never reached a closing point. And the responsibility that never reaches a closing point doesn't disappear. The responsibility remains with the person who was last holding it. Your mind keeps the call open because, as far as the system is concerned, the call is still open. And this isn't only about calls. There's the complaint you took that you never heard the end of. There's the angry email you answered without ever knowing if your answer was just enough to say it's resolved. Or the tense conversation with a coworker that stopped without ever resolving. Anytime you're handed responsibility for how something turns out, and there's no built in moment where that responsibility leaves you, your attention keeps holding the responsibility long after the interaction is done. I built Frontline Confidence for exactly this part of the work, the part where pressure moves through you with no structure around it. Because people shouldn't have to improvise their way through this every time the pressure comes up. So if you've been driving home, replaying a call, or lying awake because you're going over a conversation, then that is not a flaw in how you're wired. It's what happens to a responsible person inside a system that never gave the responsibility a place to end. You are doing your job, and the structure around the job left the last part to you. Once you can see that the call follows you home because the call was never closed, then you can start to notice something else. You're not carrying the call home because you're weak. You're carrying the call home because no one built a place for you to put it down. And that was never yours to fix on your own in the first place. There's a related pattern I want you to take a look at next. If you're the kind of person who stays steady when things get tense, you've probably noticed that you somehow end up being the one everyone leans on when a situation gets difficult. The calm person often becomes the place where the pressure goes. In this next video, I want to look at how that happens and why staying calm can end up turning you into the buffer for everyone around you. So stay with me.